What if I told you there was a way to fight the tax office and win? Not by arguing about money, but by pointing out a simple mistake in their paperwork. Well, today we're diving into an incredible story where the rulebook itself went up against raw authority, and the rulebook won.
I mean, think about it. It sounds kind of crazy, right? A huge, potentially life-changing tax bill just gone, wiped away. Not because the math was wrong, but because an official didn't follow their own schedule. That's the wild question at the very heart of this story.
All right, so let's set the scene. How did this whole thing even start? Well, like a lot of these stories do, it began with a very official-looking envelope showing up in the mail.
Inside that envelope was something called an SKPKB. You can think of it as let's call it a love letter from the tax office. It's their formal way of saying, hey, we've looked at your numbers and we think you owe us more. But make no mistake, this isn't just a friendly suggestion. It's a legal document with the full weight of the law behind it.
Now, this is where our taxpayer does something completely unexpected and, frankly, pretty brilliant. They get this massive bill, and what do? They don't argue about the numbers. They don't say the calculation is wrong. Instead, they challenge the process. It was a bold move, basically saying, I'm not going to argue about the score. I'm going to argue about how you played the game.
So, what was the secret weapon? What was the ace up their sleeve in this high-stakes game? Well, it all boiled down to one simple, powerful rule about time.
Their weapon was a regulation called the PMK. Think of this as the official rulebook, the holy manual for every tax inspector out there. And it's not a list of helpful tips. These are binding rules that dictate every single step of a tax audit. And deep inside this manual was one very, very clear rule.
And here is where the whole case cracks wide open. According to that rulebook, the PMK, a tax audit has to be finished within 8 months. Max, no ifs, ands, or buts. So this audit started in August 2023. The finish line should have been May 2024. But look at this. The results don't even come out until March of the next year, and the final bill isn't sent until June. That deadline wasn't just missed, it was left in the dust.
Just how badly was it missed? 371 days. That's not a small slip-up. That's more than a year past the legal deadline. And that one number? That became the entire foundation for the case against the tax authority.
The plaintiff's argument was just so clean and logical. Step 1. The 8-month deadline was broken. That's a fact. Nobody could deny it. Step 2. Because that rule was broken, anything the tax office did after that deadline was legally baseless. Step 3. If the process was invalid, then the final product of that process, the tax bill, has to be invalid too. Which leads to the final demand. This bill has to be legally canceled.
And just to add a little human drama to this whole thing, apparently at some point during this massive delay, the inspector told the taxpayer, don't worry, ma'am, we'll help. It's a nice sentiment, right? But in hindsight, it stands in pretty stark contrast to the procedural mess that was unfolding.
But of course, the state wasn't just going to take this lying down. They came back with a counter-argument of their own. And to be honest, it was a really strong one. So, if the taxpayer's weapon was that detailed rulebook, the state brought out a bazooka. It's called the UUKUP, and it's basically the supreme law of the land when it comes to taxes in Indonesia. In the legal food chain, this thing sits way, way above the PMK rulebook.
So this slide really gets to the heart of the fight. On one side, you have the taxpayer saying, that 8-month deadline in your rulebook is a hard stop. You missed it, the whole thing is void. But on the other side, the state argues, hold on, that 8-month thing, that's just an internal goal for us, like a KPI. Our real power comes from the supreme law, the UKUCAP, and that law gives us a full 5 years to do our job. A little internal regulation can't override a supreme law. You can see why this was such a tough case.
This whole situation put the judge in a really difficult position. This wasn't just about reading two different rules. This was a clash between two huge fundamental ideas in law.
So what was the judge really weighing here? On one hand, you've got this principle called kepastian hukum. It basically means legal certainty, the right for every citizen to know what the rules are and the trust that they'll be followed predictably. But on the other hand, you have kewenangan negara, state authority, the government's legitimate power to collect taxes to, keep the country running. Both are vital. So which one wins?
And this is where the judge's reasoning was just so powerful. The court decided that procedural rules, like that 8-month deadline, aren't just internal suggestions for employees. No, they are a binding promise from the state to its citizens. The whole point of having these rules is to guarantee that legal certainty we just talked about. The logic was simple.
If the government doesn't have to follow its own rules, how can it expect anyone else to trust the system?
So, with that incredible reasoning laid out, we finally get to the moment of truth, the final decision, the moment the gavel came down.
The verdict was clear, simple, and absolutely decisive. The taxpayers' entire claim was granted, in full, a complete and total victory.
The impact of this is huge. First off, that official tax assessment letter, canceled. The massive tax bill that came with it, invalid. But the biggest consequence is the precedent this sets. It sends a crystal clear message that procedure matters. The state and its officials have to play by the same rules they set for everyone else.
And all of this leaves us with one final fascinating question to think about. How should we see this ruling? Is it just a clever legal loophole that people can use to get out of paying taxes? Or is it something more, like a protective fortress for citizens, a vital reminder that even the power of the state has limits, and that those limits are defined by the rule of law? What you think about that really says a lot about the kind of system we want to live in.